Hey folks, I have read your practicum logs this morning and this afternoon and then looked at your portfolio part 2 and have given you feedback. Your feedback for your practicum logs are in the Typhon log and your grade is within the rubric within Blackboard. Your portfolio feedback is all in your rubric. Just make sure that you go in there and look at that. Notes about your portfolio, be sure that before you start part 3, you go back in and make sure you've made any needed changes to part 1 as well as part 2 and that they're clean. And then you're going to add part 3. We'll talk more about that when it gets closer to being due, but if you do start working ahead, just make sure that you have integrated all the feedback. Your final product should look like a polished, ready to use tool. So be sure that you have integrated feedback that's been provided. Your practicum logs look great. You're on the right track. You make sure that you have gone through and looked at your original goals and objective document and that you have documented the completed days for each of those goals and each of those objectives. That's an artifact that's going to be submitted in part 3, so you need to make sure you're working ahead and anticipating that to be turned in. Let's talk real quick about the integrative literature part 2. Some of you, I think on the Ask the Professor link, were asking is a paper due as well as the matrix? And the answer is no. If you do this matrix well, you're going to accomplish steps 17, 18, 19, 20, and 22. What those steps are addressing is that you're in the literature, that you're pulling relevant articles, and that you're doing an analysis of those findings. Remind you, part 1 is your blueprint. So before you start part 2, make sure your blueprint is squared away. If you have questions or concerns, reach out. So make sure that part 1 is squared away before you start part 2. When you start part 2, the only thing you're submitting is a completed matrix. So you should follow your blueprint, use the Boolean phrases, use the databases and the parameters and the filters that you have said you were going to use, and you're going to begin to screen your articles. When I say screen, you're going to be looking for ones that appear through their abstract to be relevant, and you're going to pick 20 to 25 abstracts that appear to be related to your PICOS question. Once you've pulled those are the articles that you're going to put into the matrix, and you're going to put each of them in, and you're going to normally, the idea is to put them in alphabetical order. Don't make yourself nuts if you don't do that. Some people like to put in their articles by date of publication. I'm not going to ding you if you choose to organize them in a different way. All I want is that they're on there, and that you have 20 to 25 reasonably likely sources of good data. Now, those articles that you've pulled based on their abstract and relevance to your PICOs, you're going to go in and read those articles. And based on what you've read in those articles, you're going to fill out the matrix, and you're going to include or exclude articles. A minimum of 15 articles is required. So let's say you go through and you've picked 20, and you've read all 20 of them, and you realize that 6 of them aren't what you thought they were, and that you made a mistake. Either the population is too far, or you realize that maybe there's bias in it that really skews the results. And you're going to exclude those, and you're going to explain why you excluded them. But that leaves you with 14 articles. Well, then you're going to go back to the original filters that you put on, the original searches, and you're going to go back into your search findings, and you're going to pull a few more. And you're going to keep doing that until you have at least 15. I can tell you that doesn't happen very often, where you pull 20 to 25 and then you wind up not having enough, but every once in a while it does happen. So anticipate that that first bunch may not be enough. I like the idea of pulling 25. That way, if you do run short, you're not up against the wall and having to go back into the literature. The idea is that you're picking articles that are likely to be successful. So follow that process. Use the articles that you have found. You're going to fill in the matrix. You want to be very careful that you are filling it in correctly and thoroughly. I can show you, but mine is really little and you probably can't see it because I know what it says, so I didn't blow it up in big pictures. You want to make sure that you understand the difference between research methods and research designs. So your research methods are your approach to your study question. The research article that you're reading is going to have either a qualitative or a quantitative or a mixed methodology approach to their research, and you want to identify how did they go about answering their research question, and that's the method. The design is the overall structure of your research process. What did they do to organize their research? That would include their exact research question, their sample methods, how they were going to collect their data, and their plans for analysis. Did they have a statistical method they were going to use? What was their general approach? You don't need to put book, chapter, and verse, but you do need to hit the highlights of what their plan for their study design and analysis looks like. Your population and sample is pretty straightforward. The study intervention is what did they do? So did they have, was it a controlled study? Was it just an observational study? What did they actually do? Did they sit in 40 students in a room and watch them do something? So you want to talk about what the actual intervention was. Your theoretical framework. Know that not every research article is going to have a theoretical framework. If it does not, put none. If you go through 20 articles and none of them have a theoretical framework, I'm going to encourage you to go back to your research book and make sure you understand what a theoretical framework is. Some should have it, okay? And if you have none, then you need to really be suspicious about the quality of all of your research. The best of the best are going to use a theoretical framework. The reality is, not everybody does. So just know that you need to be looking for it. And if you don't find any of them, then you need to kind of question your own understanding of that and go back into the literature and go back in and make sure that you're looking correctly. Your findings, the findings are of that researcher's findings. What did they find and how is it relevant? Again, I don't need, paragraphs and paragraphs, a couple of sentences of this is what they found. Your levels of evidence, go back to your evidence chart. It's page 4 of your instructions. You're going to go through and assign the appropriate level of evidence. Remember, you're not going to use level 1 because those are existing systematic integrative reviews, and they are not considered primary research, so they're excluded. They've already done your work for you, so you're not going to use those. I realize that they're gold standards, they're the best of the best, but they've already done an integrative literature review, and they are secondary sources, so you're going to exclude those. The other level that you're going to exclude is the level of evidence of 7, and that's your gray material. Those are your dissertations, opinions, editorials, commentaries. They're squishy, and they're not real research. So when you're screening your articles from your databases and you're picking those 20 to 25, make sure you're not picking up existing integrative literature reviews or editorials, commentaries, or dissertations. Those should never be on your matrix to begin with, okay? So if you've excluded those in your screening of your abstracts, you are less likely to run into trouble and having to find new articles. Okay. What else is on here? Okay, included or excluded, all it wants the word. Did you include it or exclude it? That's it. And then at the end, your last box that says rationale, that's where you put why you included it and why you excluded it. And folks, it is not enough to say because it relates to my PCOS. Yes, but why? What part of this study addresses what part of your PCOS? Why is it a good study? Again, couple of sentences. I don't need paragraphs. Just tell me what's the meat of the material and how is it most closely related to your PCOS. And if it's not related to your PCOS, then it shouldn't be included. Okay, that's the nuts and bolts of your integrative literature review matrix. You're going to add that as an Excel spreadsheet and you're going to load it into Blackboard, and that's the end of it. Let's see if I have any other notes. The beeping you hear are quiches that are in the oven that are telling me that they're done. So I need to wrap up. Otherwise, my quiche is going to be overdone and my dinner is going to be ruined. Last comment. Several of you put that you had the goal of taking the Certified Nurse Educator exam. I want to encourage you to really think through working in the role of a nurse educator before you try to take the exam. It's a tough exam, folks. I know people that have taught for years and weren't really thinking that it would be tough, and they were not successful. So think about working as a nurse educator for a little while, especially in a didactic or a classroom setting. Test analysis is something that really grabs people by the ankles and they have a hard time with it. So if you're not in a classroom setting, you're only in a practicum setting or clinical setting, Talk with people who do test analysis. Work with a mentor to prepare for the certified nurse exam. There's some prep courses. I'm a big believer if you're supposed to be certified, you shouldn't need a prep course, but that's personal opinion. Just think through it before you jump into it. I hope you guys are having a great week. Know that I'm here. I am praying for you. Use the Ask the Professor link for the who, what, where, when, and then just email me with anything personal. Take care, y'all.